welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I'm Chris Lucian, and I'm joined by my co-host, Austin Chadwick. And today we are bringing with us Tom Cagley, and we're going to be talking about promiscuous mobbing and fear, and Agile and contracts. So this should be a really exciting episode. To get us kicked off, Tom, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe your relationship to both Agile and mobbing and et cetera, et cetera.
I'm too afraid to do that. Tom Cagley, I'm an Agile guide. I'm an author, a podcaster, a once upon a time coder, once upon a time tester that has, I think, lived in the Agile and the Agile process world for the past 14 years-ish. Before that, did other things like CMMI and other horrible things that probably would destroy my credibility to keep throwing on the heap. That's who I am, right? And where do I come across mobbing? To be honest with you, when I was a coder, I think mobbing would have elicited some interesting responses. Might have actually made what we did significantly better, but today, right, as a consultant, as a guide, I help teams actually adopt things like mobbing, both in terms of actual software teams and in many cases, teams that are outside of, the general Agile world. They're doing things like, building manuals, writing books. So the concept of mobbing is actually very useful, especially when they're wrestling with what is it they're going to put together, a standards manual, or actually recently what ends up being an electronic book that has all of the court cases for a specific month and a specific topic area in the state of Illinois for a large firm. So fun stuff, but it's not all coding per se. It's not all software.
Absolutely. And we
is
all
the world
have,
all software?
Yeah. we all have histories to us, so we're all friends here. So no worries about some of the older practices. We got you. So I guess, could you describe promiscuous mobbing to us and what that looks like to you, and then maybe we can share.
Okay, cool. And I'd love to hear your take on it. So the whole idea of teams and static teams, passé is probably not the right word, but is sometimes a struggle for organizations, and a struggle for the right reason, right? Today, we're going to work, or for the next few months, we're going to work on this. But you know what? Halfway through, we're going to blow it up and work on something else. So dynamic reteaming, stuff that Heidi Heflin talks about, that kind of stuff. But even on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, where people come together, work on a specific thing all together, and then wander away. They wander away for a lot of good reasons. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm the thing that I'm really good at, editing or doing legal review, we don't need that anymore. But we need it over here. And we can only have one of them in the organization, because who wants to employ 1,000 lawyers to write a book, right? You only need a couple of them, and you can just feel them around. So promiscuous, they group together when they need to group together. They fall apart when they need to fall apart. And everybody's, and still, if this were non-COVID times, right, they'd kiss and go away and go off and be with some other people for a while, kind of thing.
That's fascinating. So the idea that occurred to me when I was thinking of promiscuous mobbing maybe is slightly different than what you just described there, because I was thinking of the first time I heard that term was with promiscuous pairing, right? And I think it was kind of like an idea out of like the Joy Inc. book or something where they switch pairs every week, for example. And that concept, it was more like full-time pair programming type thing.
Right.
And so what you're describing, if I'm understanding right, is something a little more, you may or may not be doing full-time mobbing or pairing, but the idea is that you come and form a mob as needed to get a job done. And it may be different people each time, or I guess, where am I off there?
No, you're not off.
Okay.
The only tweak to it, and again, multiple observations, sometimes even participated in this, multiple observations that would suggest that the organization, the teams, might all be mobbing all the time, especially in a couple of them. One was software, one was not software. Mobbing all the time, just not mobbing with the same people all of the time. So it's probably a little closer to the Menlo folks, but not really, because they pick up and rearrange themselves as they see fit over the life of a month, or life of a release, life of a sprint. Again, everyone knows who each other are, and today probably all have them up on screens in their living room all the time. But it's I'm going to work with Austin, Chris, and Tom. We're going to work together for some period of time, maybe half a dozen other people, and we're going to use mobbing techniques to do that. And then, it's going to break down because Austin has to go off and be somewhere else. Perhaps he goes on vacation. Perhaps the whole team goes up. And then people just filter off. And then they may or may not come back together. They may or may not just regroup somewhere else.
Yeah, I was actually just in the Lean Coffee just before this recording, and one of three people from one team were in that Lean Coffee, and they were talking a little bit about their style of rotation. And so right now it's a group of 11 people, three mobs. And what they end up doing, what they used to do is they just would, there's a website that has like a Wheel of Fortune style randomizer, and then they just like spin the wheel, right? And then they just put everybody on the team. So they were doing that every week or every 2 weeks. And then there was some retrospectives around like context loss and things like that, if you replace every single member of the team. And so now there's, they spin the wheel to decide which one person on each team stays on that mob. And then they spin the wheel for everyone else to scatter them everywhere else. And so a lot of randomization happens in that group. It's really cool.
What benefit did they get out of that?
So a lot of like context circulation, different areas of the code, decision-making being reviewed by multiple people. So like maybe one day you start a feature and then the next day you have a different set of people on that feature. And then somebody has to explain like why they made the choices they did going forward. And the verbalization of that kind of comes up. But the teams essentially decided to do this on their own. They basically came there through retrospectives, but there's like a natural tendency in the group that we're in that to randomize over make things static. And so it's been really, it was a really cool discussion. And then there was one other person from another team saying, oh, well, what we're currently doing is, and I believe he said, so they were doing randomization every 2 weeks, and then they moved to every week, just randomizing. So it's like the same group of people on that team, but that team will randomize between the two mobs on one team and the three mobs on the other team. They randomize people. Then there's kind of like an overall, there's a rule that I ended up putting in place, which was no one can be on the same team for more than 2 years in a 3-year period, kind of modeling the capital gains tax law. And so And so basically it's you know, in the last 3 years, you can only be on any one project for a maximum of 2 years. And so that then causes some additional circulation. But a lot of it is, you know, is our documentation good enough to onboard somebody? Is our onboarding process good enough to welcome somebody in? Do we maintain context out externally more, or are we building tribal knowledge, that sort of stuff? So yeah, that's kind of our story with it.
Yeah, on the promiscuous side, you know, I have only seen it in relatively small organization, you know, 40 or 50 people, where everybody really does know each other.
Yeah,
even,
we're about
even if they're
people.
geographic. And so therefore they move around. But again, they're moving around, and they can move, you know, roughly every 6 hours. So they move around a lot more. But because it's one basic product set, I don't think they have as much, you know, context switching. So they're still working on the same basic product. And they don't use, at least the ones that I've been involved with have luckily enough gotten rid of the whole idea of projects and really are focused on working a hard product backlog kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
these are,
I'll be honest with you. I did forward them over your recent interview, not interview, but show on making decisions in mobbing.
Nice.
Because they were struggling with that a little bit the last time I was over there. So over there virtually kind of thing.
Yeah.
We don't go anywhere anymore. This is sad.
Yeah. Oh, I had a follow-up question for you, Tom. So, why as a coach would you suggest this kind of dynamic moving around type thing? You know, what benefits have you seen? What results have you seen from, I guess, people being very static, and then I guess this kind of model where you try to coach in the promiscuous mobbing or the promiscuous switching around? What are your experiences with it, and why do you?
There's a couple of. There are two main reasons. One is I think it keeps people interested, and you know, you can't make the argument that people have attention spans shorter than goldfish, because that's you know, crappy mathematics. But we do have relatively short attention spans. Switching that up, assuming that it doesn't blow up context and it, you know, doesn't blow up focus, I think allows people to have that new hit of something so that they're always learning. And so that's a big deal. In other organizations where they do have some really hardcore specialties, the book publication in essence, and that's what they were for years and years. They're mostly online now. But there are some roles where you're never going to get T-shaped. I mean, these are you need somebody to go through this stuff that is a bar-trained lawyer with 3 or 4 explicit specialties. You're not going to distribute that, and nor is anybody probably going to sit for the bar and all the addendums to it to be able to have multiples on the team, and they're expensive. So being able to move those people around, I think allows those kind of specialties to actually be leveraged effectively. Plus, it does, instead of working in an absolute silo where they're all by themselves, it then does help other people tee off so that they understand what those needs are, so that when they're using this specialty kind of person, you know, again, really, really rare, but you know, that kind of specialty person, they're doing it in a way that they can at least know what the language is. So those are the two reasons I've seen this work. And it's real fun to say promiscuous model.
Yeah. I love it. I think it reminds me a little bit of the efficiency paradox TED talk that's out there, because a lot of it has to do with like lean flow, right? So
yes.
So rather than creating a ticketing system where this person, the specialist, has to look at every ticket and they just Kanban through their own tickets, right? They go to the work in process, like handle it in flow, and then leave when they're no longer needed. And it's like, it's very different because it's kind of like on the spot in the middle. So what happens like if they're, if two groups need the same person at the same time? Is it not a big deal because they're just such short time periods, or is it?
Yeah. In these cases, I have not run into a problem where people will have to sit for any period of time.
That's great. Yeah.
And the work doesn't tend to sit.
Yeah.
I could make up a really good example where that would be possible, but if you're aware of where that would be possible, then you can do your best to navigate so that it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm using to navigate in a different way there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, if I go back, you're not the only one with waterfall in their background, right? So, I mean, I go back a couple shops and where it seemed like the standard thing was a subject matter expert. And it was like, this person's career was this app or this tech or this product. And the company invested in that person and they were the specialist in that and they got everything. Yep. And then I was at one company that was at the tail end of losing a lot of those people to retirement. And so it was a lot of like formal knowledge transfer type stuff. And then that person would retire and leave. And I kind of realized not a whole lot of knowledge transfer really happened. It was just kind of flailing that took place after that.
Well, that's why they can come back as consultants. And
yeah, exactly.
I did see that too, actually, at that place. So, but, and then I, fast forward 12, 13 years. And in the last 3 years, I've been on 3 different product teams and several different mobs inside those product teams. And this is kind of transitioning to our next topic on mobbing and fear. It's kind of a scary place to be jumping around in different tech stacks with different people, because it's only the different tech stacks also draw interest, but people teach you different things when you're with different people in mobs. But it's scary at times to be doing those switches. But oh my gosh, it's like the learning high of a conference, like every day. You know what I mean? Like there's so much learning that happens. And then when someone leaves, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, we got it. You know what I mean? And then it just keeps moving, and so, yeah, but I guess to transition to mobbing and fear, have you seen some scared people out there?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of frightened people. I mean, the fact, and again, a lot of it does come back to the whole idea that you place yourself at risk, you put yourself in front of other people, but at the same time, if you're a manager, and this is where the fear that I run into most of the time, especially when people are attempting to start or leverage mobbing, is, hey, I'm no longer truly running this group. I'm the tech leader. I'm the manager of this team. What's my role in life now? And therefore they're afraid for their jobs, and therefore they push back. Nobody wants this. And luckily I've not run into someone starting up relatively recently. So I don't know what the world is like with this job market and the COVID world, where I think fear would be even a stronger motivator for people, that they wouldn't be able to have an enlightened self-interest, that they, to use probably a very strong term, they would look at that and almost be myopically greedy in terms of trying to hold power to themselves. So there's fear putting yourself in front of people, right? So and that's probably coachable through. There's the fear of leaders who no longer have teams that they truly are managing. And I'm throwing in some air quotes there, since this is audio. But that's the problem, right? How does one diffuse the fear?
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I think intuitively, it's easy to understand why mobbing can be scary, right? the magic is being seen by all, or the lack of magic, right? Like when you go to navigate or code or whatever, right? Maybe help me understand a little bit.
Austin, you can't even type. How can you do that?
Oh, my mom sees all my horrible spelling mistakes every day, and it's always embarrassing. Yeah. But the other one, maybe you can help me understand a little bit more from what your experiences are. What are the particular management's causes of fears exactly? So it's like people start mobbing.
What does a middle manager do in a mob scenario? What's their role in life? Today,
non-technical middle manager?
Even a technical middle manager, where what's their role in life? Their role in life is to have sharp elbows and start to continue moving up the hierarchy. Arguably, right?
Sure.
You know, if we take a look at sort of the typical organizational hierarchy, you get past the team level where people have the right agile mindset, and maybe some at the top in some places, but the movement through that ranks isn't by collaboration and mindset and dealing with all of those things. It's you move up that ladder in many cases, whether it's right or wrong, the right thing to do, by having really sharp elbows and being able to trip the person in front of you. I mean, it's not enlightened self-interest that's moving those people up that ladder in many circumstances. So when they can no longer manage a team and use that knowledge as part of their sharp elbows, how do they move up that corporate ladder? I mean, I'm sure we could, there are all sorts of ways to deal with that, yeah. but that's the day-to-day sort of reality that they're dealing with. I want the next layer in the ladder. How do I get there when all at I might be helping facilitate this, or I might just be doing HR paperwork for people. Does that move you up the ladder?
Yeah.
So that's part of the fear that I think some organizations are keeping them away from allowing this to percolate and allowing teams to actually work together and using techniques like mobbing, some other probably techniques, or even pairing makes it scary for that middle manager.
Yeah. Fear in general, right? Like if there's no psychological safety, then good decision making goes out the window. I think whether or not it's related to mobbing, right? Pairing, extreme programming, unit testing, like all the way down to, just tying your shoelaces. If you're afraid and you're trying to tie your shoelaces, there's a lot of times where you can't do it properly, right? So yeah, I agree. So what, do you have any examples of ways that you've conquered this with people, or maybe helped them move past it if you noticed that this was happening? Or is this something like a philosophy of upper management being brought down on middle management or something along those lines? I think
the answer is yes, probably to all of those things. By the way, someday we'll have a discussion about unit testing, which I think not doing is malpractice.
In many cases, it can be.
Well, actually, in the Crown versus Accenture in Canada, that was a finding that that not doing unit testing is, if you're an engineer, the true is actually considered malpractice. So it's like, that was scary. But so how do you deal with that, right? So how do you deal with it? I think you can deal with that at at one level of the organization. You can help them, especially if they are, like Austin asked, if they're more technical in nature. You can actually get them involved with their team, so that they're actually participating as a player. And I think that helps allay their fear. They may well have different roles and have to, sometimes isolate themselves and pull out. That's, I think, where the perhaps a little bit more promiscuousness allows them to do that. But I don't know that I have found a good answer for as it creeps up that ladder. Because again, the farther away, you're not going to participate. And if you do, you're probably ignoring the strategic things that you ought to keep your eye on. So there's that demarcation line where I think having the correct mindset and accepting it is important. But I think they have to adopt that all on their own. There is no, I've had over the years, you've looked at organizations that have adopted Agile, and you've had these arguments. Well, hey, it'll get easier as people move up the ladder and they take their ideas and move forward. And I do not see any remarkable amount of data that would suggest that's true. I think there is something. I have to, go back to my days when I was an executive and find out at what point did somebody sneak in and take a liposuction tube to the back of my brain and take out all my Agile values and ideas. And when I got to be a guide and a coach, they came back in some evening and put them all back in. There's something that's going on here. We have not found that right equation to move it all the way up. But I think, again, short term, get the people at that sort of the coal face, get them back involved in actually doing work. Mm-hmm. At some point, part of that, let's face it, I don't know about y'all, but when I moved from actually doing real work, back when I had a real job, I was coding and testing and making stuff, it just, that ages off as soon as you stop doing that. So there has to be, and that may be fear in its own right. Oh my God, I got to go relearn how to code again.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating to think about it from higher than like right above the team, right? And go up that ladder. I think it seems like if you're going through some sort of, values and principles transformation where you're valuing collective decision-making and team ownership and things like that, it seems no matter where you're at, you would have to switch from command and control to coaching, right? Into some sense. Because I think anyone who is a formal command and control leader, like you said, there's nothing for them to do really, if the teams are making the decisions. And so,
other than getting away.
Yeah, then getting away. Yeah. So I mean, I feel like I've seen some people make that transition where they're like, "Hey, I'm a manager, but the most effective way to help out my team is to coach my mob now." And even if they were, we can just envision a malicious, what'd you call it, pointy-elbowed
sharp
manager.
elbows.
Yeah. I mean, it takes some it takes some people skills, even if you're using those skills for bad, to like read people, understand people, and interact with people, that could be turned for good. But, as far as like, there's a lot of tracks we've seen out there on facilitating a mob or coaching or doing something like that, even though you have no technical skills, right? So you could be in a mob helping coach their retrospectives or their switching or how they interact with each other, how they make decisions. And it, in fact, might be helpful if you don't understand the code so well, so I think there is a transition there, but I think like what you said is it's kind of a heart change for somebody, right? And so I don't know if I've seen anybody I know personally who had to go through that. I'm trying to think. So Chris, I mean, there's been not with management, but with other roles, right? Like manual testing, right? I think you've had some stories. Oh. Yeah.
So I think what you're getting at is the site. So formally in our group we used to have manual testers, and then gradually we started automating everything. And in that we it's kind of an existential crisis, similar, I guess, to the manager, the traditional pointy-elbowed manager person. And so, there could have been responses out of fear there, but I think just like an increased level of psychological safety allowed this to work well, right? It was basically, hey, come and write the tests with us and think of the test cases, and then many of our manual testers ended up becoming some of our best software developers because they had a really keen eye for testing scenarios that would then play into the automated test creation, right? And gradually over time, their software skills also got a lot better as well. And then basically all of our formerly manual testers ended up becoming essentially full-blown software developers who write tests before they write production code. And so I think that's true as well for in the other, that would be true for somebody that's going from a like managery role and transitioning to something that's more embedded in the team. And I think the analogy there between the two scenarios is like that manager type person probably knows things like lean and Kanban a little bit more than maybe the software developers might, right? Like, and so they can combine their skills in order to make a better team. So even if that person was on the mob, basically they could act as a buffer between the rest of the business and thrashing and doing multiple items, work in process, and not doing the lean stuff, right? So like there could be value in there likely is value in combining that skills of the team, making sure that the Kanban is up to date and things like that. But that's all like very like coachy type roles, right? So
again, if they're sharing ideas and information, if everyone's learning from each other, there is obviously value. I mean we'd all sign up for that, right? If that's what they perceive, what they want their role to be, right? If they perceived what they want their role to be a manager and then go up to the next level of management, this may well feel like a derailment of their career, right? That would make them fearful. That would then make them resist. That would make them be, a problem within a group that they had to participate on. And interestingly enough, I just was on a call earlier today where they're talking about, breaking up and reorganizing their teams. Some people who were quote unquote managers are now back in the team. Some are going to be managers, and nobody knows, who's going to be what. And they're all, it's hard to watch people. You're sitting on a Zoom call, and it's hard to watch people and watch them position themselves and do sort of the pins and needles thing, because they don't know where they're going to be.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
Yeah.
Mobbing would help them. But they've heard that from me multiple times.
I mean, and so maybe this is one thing that jumps out to me, and I've seen it in some organizations somewhat, but it's probably more of an area for learning for me, is I've seen some organizations somewhat recently that started out more traditional, right? Traditional hierarchy going up. And then as they became more, have an agility mindset, it became, instead of going up the ranks in management, it became like, oh, I'm the coach for this one team, to I'm coaching 3 teams. And now I'm coaching 4 coaches who coach other teams. You know what I mean? Like it becomes coaches all the way up to the C-suite, basically. I've seen that a little bit, at least at one place. And so it's almost like you take that same mindset of the manager right above the team, and then you just apply it up. And so
that would be fair.
Yeah.
Or something like Holacracy or Teal or some of the other more avant-garde, I'm told they have fallbacks.
I mean, a lot of it is like just mentorship over like lording power over people, right? Like it's easy. And I think that sort of behavior, like again, the whole like hierarchical structure in organizations is kind of like it's an incentive structure to behave in a certain way, right? And so like, basically, I was at one company a long time ago that was basically managers would be pitted against each other. It's like, oh, hey, are you going to be successful? Why aren't you doing it like they are? They are way better than you guys. Like I heard that told to people, and I've heard stuff like that, and like just these like direct comparisons, right? And so it was always a deep, like, a very dark competition happening at the middle management level, and those people just wanted to be the people on top saying the same stuff down to the people that they're at right now.
Sure.
Right. And so like the incentive structure just like creates that, right? Like people kind of evolve to the surrounding organization, right? So there's a lot, I think, to do with, basically grassroots initiatives take a lot of work because they have to fight all of that downward pressure, right, on their way up. Top down culture changes have to basically work their way down from the top, and if you like bludgeon people with it, you will be mobbing, right? Like there will be revolts as well, right? So like I think just like simply as incentive structures are created, right, it kind of, to me, it almost has to be like gamified to be, the appropriate be the appropriate result, and make things, say, it has to be rewarding to be safe, right? And because it's very easy for people, humans are creatures that like to play games, whether they're like board games or interpersonal games or whatever. And so like carefully designed incentive structures is also a really important thing. And so giving, if you want the individuals to do well, then give the individuals the power to decide whether they're being led well, and things like that, to basically create circular systems of reward, and that, I think, is much more tangible than just a top-down hierarchy where everything comes from the top and then you kind of let it trickle down all the way. So it's definitely a difficult subject, and but
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That almost needed an amen. And I'm gonna use that and send that to Steve Tendon. We're having that debate. You have to change the organization and the organization and how it's paid. You're just absolutely dead on.
Okay.
Yeah. Can't change without that.
Yeah, and it is not just theory. I mean, I've lived in both worlds. So the previous places I was at, I knew to get past a certain level, I think I was too not experienced enough to have to worry about it too much. It was like, well, I'm just a contributor for now, and I don't really have to worry about going up the chain. But at a previous place, it's like at a certain point, I knew I had to put on the manager, director hat and command and control type style to keep going up. But at the current organization, what was fascinating was when I arrived, it was part of the onboarding to say like, hey, here's your current role, and here's the incentive structure to get up. And the way to get up higher was to help each other out such that others promote you, peer nominations. And the way you help others is you contribute well, is like this foundation. You learn well, contribute well, and then you start moving into coaching and teaching and those kind of things. And the more you do those things, the more you'll be incentivized, the more you'll get promoted, so to speak. And so I think it just made it like natural in that system to want to do those things. Yeah. What's that?
I said, wow. And it worked.
And it worked. Yeah. I was incentivized. Yeah. So, I mean, regardless of the results or whatever, it was more just that I knew like, oh, that's how you do it in the system. Right. And so, yeah, I think it was refreshing. Cool. I think I'll transition topics. We can probably hit it for a little bit. I don't know how much we'll get into it. I'm actually eager to talk about it. So maybe it'll be more of a teaser for part 2 that maybe we'll do later with Tom. But so me and Chris were actually talking about this topic last week, Agile and contracts. And we were kind of going back and forth. So what's your take on it, Tom?
Possible to do. Just not easy, right? And it depends on what kind of contract you're dealing with. So, I mean, let's face it, you have just, I'm going to outsource the whole bucket of work. I'm going to, in essence, outsource bits and pieces of it. But the whole idea of Agile and contracting is that you have to build it into the contract. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, right? So you have to clue your purchasing people in on it. You have to make sure that whomever your contract lawyer is, because they've gone to school, they figured out how to write contracts, they know what is going to hold up if they have to actually go to the mattress and get the contract weapons out. All of those things have to be modified to address the mindset issues that are required to make Agile work. I mean, I guess you could. So I ran across this, and this doesn't work. So here's a great anti-pattern, sort of prime the pump. We're going to do a fixed price, fixed amount of functionality, fixed date contract. I mean, that's a classic, right? I can probably go out and I can go out and find a half a dozen companies within 50 miles of me that are doing that. They are. I mean, they think it's like going to Best Buy and buying something off the shelf. And they get away with it, right? So how do you make that work with Agile? But you have to do Agile. So I actually ran into it, and it's exactly it. But and we'll build the backlog. We'll build the backlog for this once you've signed the contract. There's words that are just itching to come out of my mouth. It's like, how in God's name does that work, right? But they get people to sign it. They get big companies to sign these kind of contracts. And then they do all sorts of goofy things, right? The whole Agile thing is just window dressing at that point. Can't work, just can't work. They're going to do sprints. They might use SAFe, they might use DAD, they might use less. They're going to do the numbers, but there's no mindset. And hey, I got this contract, and contracts in general are low trust scenarios, because what are you going to do? Hey, you broke the contract. I'm going to go over here to my lawyer and we'll see in court, right? And let's face it, you can sue a ham sandwich. You don't have to be right. It's whoever has the bigger pockets and the will wins in those circumstances. So it works if you build it in, you start the right conversations, and you put the structures in that support the mindset. But if you're going to just use standard contracting techniques, it's just goofier. Bad stuff happens.
So here's the follow-up question I have. It appears that if I were to start a consultancy and I would want to do things that way, am I risking losing clients by like coming out with a different contract, right? To say like, they come up and they ask me, say, hey, I want features A through Z by this date for this, what's your bid? You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And it's like, well, before I give you a bid, let's restructure the contract, and boom, they walk out the door, right? So like.
So what? So I'll give you a Seth Godin answer, right? You want the clients, in that case, right? If you're going to do that, you're going to be a consultant. You want the clients that you can actually succeed with and that you can actually deliver value to. So what if they walk out the door? They were probably going to be a box of rocks anyway. And so you said, fine, got to use Agile. but I'll sign that contract, and here's his fixed bid, fixed price, fixed date. And, that's why I have gray hair. I know damn well that never worked. It didn't work. It didn't work when I had real hair like you guys do. It didn't work, but everybody did it. And of course they can leave Austin, but and they're going to find somebody who'll take that. You don't want them. Let them go. Let them go.
Fascinating.
So long, farewell. No.
Yeah. So these days, there's probably enough people that are willing to engage in Agile contracts than I think were back, 10, 20 years ago. I know when I was doing military contracting, we had an IDIQ contract, which is indefinite duration, indefinite quantity. And that project ended up being very Agile because it was, they show up, we build some stuff, we show it to them, they leave happy, they kind of show up again, build some stuff, And so, so like, I know they're out there and I've seen it work. And so I think that, again, there's like a lot of fear in the contracting world that you're giving up all the money that you could be otherwise having. It might be more of a hustle for finding good Agile contracts than.
Yes, it probably is significantly better, but once you build that trust, the ones that I've seen actually do that and go down that path actually are around for a lot longer. They do a lot more work with people, and they have really good reputation. So it exists. It is harder to sell, especially it's harder to sell if people have gotten used to just saying, this is what I want, and I'll be back on Tuesday to pick it up. Kind of.
Yeah.
Let's face it, we've all been there. We come back on Tuesday to pick it up, and you go, I'm sorry, that's not my car that you just fixed. It's not a way to build trust and actually deliver the maximum amount of value. You get what you order, perhaps. You don't necessarily get what you need.
Yeah.
Cool. Had a sort of a bad paraphrasing of the Rolling Stones.
Should make a song out of it.
Yeah. We can dub it. We can edit it. Yeah. All right. Well, I think I would love to keep talking, Tom, for much longer, but we are at time. So before we close, is there anything you'd like to share or plug?
Hey, obviously plug my podcast, the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Been around for a little while, but and this Austin guy, he's been on it once. So now we're gonna have to figure out how we talk Chris into it.
All right.
I think that's the thing I'd plug right now, and love to see your audience over there and have conversations like this.
Yeah, and I think I will double plug. I see your plug, and I'll raise it one. When I was early in my Agile learning journey, your podcast was incredibly influential in that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. With that, like and subscribe, and give us feedback on YouTube, Twitter, and more. If you see someone someone that may benefit from this value, please share it with them. And otherwise, you all have a good one, and we will talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.